Welcome again to Paul Diamond. Been a long time, Paul, but we're back again, and we've got bore people saying ECHR. You've got lots of experience in Europe. The Prime Minister loves ECHR, and I presume more members of the Labour Party like it. Nothing moves, nothing happens. The rubber boats keep coming over. People are getting mad.
Yeah, well, there's quite a lot in those questions. First, I think what the British people need to be aware of is that we have a parliament, we make our laws, and the judges enforce the laws. And what I say, sort of very slowly on that, is that don't, we all know what happened at the last general election. Labour didn't win the election, but they in a sense, the Conservatives threw it away and gave it to them, and they've got the hugest majority, the lowest turnout, I think, ever for a winning government. And I think they're way behind Jeremy Corbyn's turnout in 2017 when he lost. So it's an incredible fluke of circumstances. And I think if many of us went back to 2022 when Rishi Sunak replaced David Cameron, a Labour victory was all but impossible, and a sort of six Conservative victory was inevitable. But they decided to destroy themselves and the Conservative Party, and they've decided to give quite a hardline Labour government a run. So we had a cabinet minister, I think today or yesterday, who said, I can't remember when they said it, they said all the people crossing the channel are women and children, or something words to that. Or
well, 90%, but she's near enough.
Yeah. Well, some statement like that, and it's totally ridiculous. Even the government statistics, which are wholly inaccurate in my view, are very inaccurate. I think about 85% young men, So they're living in a fantasy created world, this government, of a very strange compassion we could talk about, a sort of a compassion that's very self-destructive, and it's a very strange virtue signaling that the left have, and it's a very irrational one. I mean, they hate Jews and Israel and whites and this and China, but they like this and that and that. It's a very racist analysis, but it's also a very strange compassion. So what I'm drawing us all back to is we have a government, we have laws, and we have courts. And all of those aren't in good shape in the United Kingdom. We have a government that isn't really committed to this issue, other than I think they recognise its electoral need to address it in some capacity. They resent it, but they're doing it. And the Conservative Party, and again, it's one of the great mysteries of time, why not only did they go on to destroy themselves, but they sort of seemed to work against everything they believed in. And I think, Rishi Sunak's last year, and this is the official figure again, so you can treble it for the real figure, actually had 1.2 million people lawfully settling in the United Kingdom, not illegally, lawfully settling. So when you've got those kind of figures, a Labour Party reducing that to an absurdly high figure of something like 500,000, which I think their stated aim is, it's still, they can still say, well, they're one up on the Conservatives, while at the same time, I think when Maggie was left office, it was like 40,000 a year entered the United Kingdom. These kind of scale of figures above 50 would have been, unthinkable. So the first point I'm making is we've got a government not prepared to pass the laws. We've got a government not prepared to. They will enforce the law in two-tier Starmer way, which means certain groups will be sympathetically treated, will understand why they want to sort of burn the town down or why they want to do this, and other groups will be viciously treated because they have to be put in their place because they're nasty people. I have some sympathy for some members of the judiciary, because even though you know the case is pretty weak, even though you know the case is bogus, even though you know the numbers are unsustainable, as a judge, you will have an individual before you who wants to live here, who has a sad story, because the third world is full of sad stories, if I could put it that way. And, you know, life is hard in those parts of the world and they want to get out. It may be no more than that. But you have the individual before you. So there's that issue. And the other issue is we've passed these stupid laws. Everybody says, well, why can't you turn a silly boat back into the sea? Why can't you do that? We've got the yeah, because we passed a law that you can't. We've passed a law that if you're in international waters and you see a boat, you have to take it in. They know we've passed that law. So they send a boat out with a third tank full. And then we've got a problem. There's a boat in the water. Our law says if you pick up a boat adrift, we've passed that law. Nobody else has. We have. We have to take that boat to the nearest national port, not to the French national port, not to Gambia's national port, to Britain's national port. Now, you can change that law. You can give different rules, but everybody from the courts to the Coast Guard to the Navy would be breaking the law while that law's in force. So we've got a bit of responsibility, but there is something very spiritually weak, if I could put it this way, and destructive, that a nation can't close its, I'm going to be a bit provocative. This is a nation that shut doors to Jews to Nazi concentration camps. They had no difficulty doing that. And they would do it again. Believe you me, if Israel was invaded like October the 6th or 7th and they had to come out, you'd be surprised how laws would be affected immediately that would actually work for once. But somehow there's no willingness for year after year after year to have any control on vast numbers just simply walking into your country. Nothing less than that, walking into your country. And there's something very sort of helpless about it. And it's like a death throes of any nation. It's like you've given up keeping your gate fixed, on your home, and there's a big sign, come in, mate, enjoy yourself. So there is so that's the first point I've mentioned. So we have a government that doesn't want to take any action. They don't enforce the law equally, and they're not going to repeal the laws. So our judges we're under the rule of law. Our judges will say if somebody can stay in Britain because they like chicken nuggets, because the law says you can stay in Britain if you like chicken nuggets. You can change that law, but you have to get on and do it. That's the first point. Second point is this government loves international law. It's the latest stage in the development. And international law is the most phooey law in the world. And they love it because they're all involved in it, and the Attorney General does all these big cases, and they go to the International Court of Justice, and just appearing before the International Court of Justice makes your knees go weak. They're phooey courts, absolutely phooey, all of them. The European Court of Human Rights is about as good as it gets, and that's got a lot and a lot and a lot of problems. And actually, Russia's departure is going to increase the woke spin of the European Court of interference, overreach, and silly judgments. And there's so many of their judgments are silly. And we have the International Court of Justice, which basically spends 90% of its time trashing Israel. They're so desperate to destroy Israel, there's virtually no international law left anymore. They sort of pass laws like Israel is responsible for the international covenant on racism and sexism in the Palestinian territories. So Israel is responsible that an Islamic Hamas state I think complies. I think I read racism or it was sexism, one of these provisions, because Israel has air dominance over Gaza. I mean, they're just putting silly rules like that, and it's all designed. And then you're not allowed to have a state unless you've got certain criteria, because the whole world's full of civil wars. Hundreds of people want states, and millions of African groups want the independent land of this and the independent land of that. So there's very strict rules on creation of states and recognition of state, except for the Palestinians. You just got to will self-determination, and you are a people. And the chaos these international courts are doing, trying to issue arrest warrants against Israeli politicians and simultaneously against dead Hamas leaders to show some kind of equality. So these are very crazy international courts. I'm trying to think of some of the crazy decisions of the European Court. I mean, there've just been so many. It's been fathers can marry their daughters-in-law against British law. There's been lots of laws on siblings marrying each other. It's simply been a sort of compassion court. They ruled against Swiss laws on climate change because climate change is discriminatory against women. Not men are sort of benefiting from climate change, but women somehow are discriminated against. And what tended to happen is there's 48 countries in the Council of Europe, so 48 judges available in the European Court, and Russia had about 12 followers, so there was a body of 12 to 15. And the irony of ironies was that Russia adopted the traditional family approach, wouldn't accept same-sex marriage, wanted sort of a more conservative approach to human rights. And so we had this irony that the former communist states were defending sort of traditional values, with the sort of European states that for 50 years had fought for sort of freedom, and Reagan and Thatcher were now sort of destroying themselves. And there's no doubt that the asylum fiasco has been caused by the European Court. I mean, I remember, there's been a couple of countries. I mean, Italy started returning boats to North Africa. That was all in breach of the law. A huge boat would come out of asylum seekers from Africa, Libya to Italy. And Italy just turned the boat round and sent it back to Libya. Well, the European Court ruled against that. They said there could be genuine asylum seekers on these boats. So the Italians could not return a boat without checking every single person on board. I mean, it makes you, and of course, the Italian Navy aren't asylum immigration officers, and they're able to. So you wonder about a country. These boats are coming in, and the court has ruled you have to check every single person who's coming into your country for asylum, even if it takes years, even if Greece hasn't got enough judges and enough courts, you've got to do it. And then Hungary's been probably the naughty boy of Europe. Everybody knows Hungary's the naughty boy of Europe. And Hungary's been taking on both the European Court of Human Rights and the Luxembourg Court. And they've been smashed. They built a fence, as you all know, on their border, where there were lots of problems for that, and people were allowed to break in. So then the Hungarians got super clever. They moved the fence 12 miles back. So they said, we're allowing everybody into Hungary. They've crossed the border into Hungary. We're just not letting them further than 12 miles in. And of course, the European Court had to deal with that little nudge of problem. Then Hungary developed the policy where we'll do the pass-through. They all want to go to Germany. We won't stop them going to Germany. But Hungary's been the bad boy of Europe. And then they've caused another controversy that they've banned all LGBT propaganda in their schools. Of course, school goes up to 18. They've just lost a major case in I think it's the Luxembourg court that European values encourages, well, you must, I haven't read the judgment, but the European values is against any prohibition on children accessing homosexual and transgender information and literature. So it's there's a war out there. And I think what you're simply saying to me, Rodney, if I could put it that way, I hope I've made something clariful. We actually can do a lot in our own country if you want to. If you want to, that's the criteria. Then we do have a big problem of international law, but it's a big problem, swirling in chaos, and you have to have a degree of knowledge that's like me to understand it. But I think they want it swirling in chaos, because the more international law chaos there is in regimes that support international law, the more this road can be walked down before people realize or they're embarrassed. I don't understand it. I can't. It looks mad to me. The taxi driver thinks it's mad. And I always say to myself, if the taxi driver says it's mad, it probably is. But at the end of the day, what you're also saying, people are fed up. They don't understand all of this. They don't understand this complexity web of laws. Sometimes they even understand, actually, there is a law, and we've passed this law, and we've asked repeatedly for this law to be changed, and they've refused. Whatever their reason is, they simply will not change. When we voted for David Cameron and he said we'll bring immigration down to the tens of thousands, and it's going up to the millions, and that's the Conservative Party, what can you do? And I think all over Europe, it's reaching buckling point. I think this is why Christians have got to have a very active role, if I could put it that way. It's reaching buckling point. Societies are, changing beyond recognition. They're no longer England, Ireland, France. They are many parts actually Islamic, etc., or African, but nothing to do with European culture and values other than welfare benefit payments being paid. And a lot of people are getting very, very desperate. So this is a very frightening situation. So you see it all over Europe now. You see Reform in England, ADF in Germany, Front National in France, the Italian government as it is. It's going to get worse because they seem to be hell bent to create this conflict. And so people are getting angry. And I think it really is going to take a lot of wisdom and that's where Christians, what is the future? How are we going to do it? Because the future of a 1950s Europe is gone. We've got to now go forward in some way of having a peaceful, ordered, free society. And the solution of the elites, and it's very confusing why anybody wants to do it, is to create as much chaos as possible. And after you've created all this chaos, we can all be tagged, ID'd, videoed and recorded, because if we didn't do that, the tinderbox would go up. That seems to be the strategy as far as anybody can tell. And there's no freedom in that.
Well, the two things that come out of this, Paul, and the question is, or the statement is before the question, where there's a will, there's a way. And if there's a will, and there clearly isn't, there'll be a way out of it, a la Hungary, if you wish. And the second thing that comes through all the time is globalism.
Well, the other thing that comes through is a man called Donald Trump. And he's just begun mass deportations. His predecessor let in, people don't know the figures, some people think it's as high as 50 million people have entered in under his predecessor through recognition of dreamer rights, open border, absolutely welcoming. It could be, some people have said, as high as 50 million new American subjects. And that's a huge number. And President Trump has simply said, I'm committed. Anybody who got in on this rag is not an American citizen. I'm not recognizing it. I don't care if you came here and Biden did ABC for you. You're not, I'm starting with the illegals and criminals first, but it's not going to end there. People know that. And I'm going to do mass deportations. And he's doing it. He's got the will. He's fighting, and there's a fight back. So there is that option when there's a will. There is the Hungary, there is the Trump option. They're not globalists. In fact, he's America first. He wants tariffs. He's reversing all of globalism's sacred texts. And you know what? What's so interesting about Trump is last time there was this constant mocking of him. And he made it very clear from day one, if you mock me, there will be terrifying consequences, and you'll never have anything from America. I'll cut off the trade if necessary with you, And have you noticed how polite everybody is to him now? Even though he's really doing things that he never did in the first term, they're very polite still, because he's made it very clear, if you play like you did last time, that's it. And no media is coming into the White House if you want to take the mickey. You want to take the mickey, you don't come in, and you lose the story. So,
yeah. Well, who's our Donald Trump in Britain, or are we nowhere near that? Is it Farage?
I suppose I'm not going to make, I'm not making any political comment. I think it probably is. He's very intelligent. He's very able. I think he's fairly moderate, actually, which I think is good. I think we've got to find he's not. He's not one. I think he's going for more sensible ground. He hasn't gone for kick this and do this. He is working on the way. We've got a reality. We've got to cut him. He's proposed one in, one out, if I could put it that way, as his immigration policy. You only let somebody in if a similar number's gone out.
Well, that's no good, Paul, if rubbish is coming in and bright, intelligent, university-trained people are going out.
Yeah, well, that could be it. A lot of bright people. The trouble is, when you tip a country over, which we've come very close to doing, people don't want to stay here. They all these lefties go on, oh, it's wonderful, multicultural, but a lot of people say, actually, it's not, not what it was, and the future isn't what it used to be. And I don't have to. Fortunately for me, I've got good degrees and job opportunities, and I'm going elsewhere. And a lot of these equations weren't fed in. I think you are right on that. But we've got to restore a quality of life first. And we've still got a lot of that in England. It's still a truth that most of the world is pretty dreadful.
Well, I can't tell you the number of people that live out here and maybe once every 10 years go back to Britain. They can't wait to get back to Spain with all its problems. It's changed. It's not our country. I don't want to smell marijuana when I'm walking down the high street. I don't want all these foreign shops. And in some parts of the country, I will name two, London and Birmingham, the white population is now in the minority. In the next 20 years, according to Matt Goodwin's latest survey, that's going to be over the whole country, and even more so.
And the question is, this is my problem, Rodney, and I need your help on this. We know all this. We see all this. And you know what? It's going to step up. They're not going to, the elites aren't going to hold back. And it's such a mad policy. Even if they had this immigration policy and they actually said you had to be a millionaire and a businessman and a genius, they don't even say that. They say you can come from some small little village in the back of beyond and need benefits the minute you land, and operations, and it's going to cost us a fortune. So it's the most insane policy. But what the answer is, what do we do? How do we stop possibly becoming a Lebanon, if that makes sense? How do we how do we work on this so we can preserve the best of the society, integrate people, preserve values? I mean, obviously, the scale of numbers, it's just been impossible to integrate anybody. So we just have parallel communities. Often, many communities in England now living as they lived in their original countries, speaking their languages, eating their own foods. And the only link with Britain is provision of housing by the local authority, you know. So I think that's what we need to do. I'm not going to purport to have this on a chat show to come up with some ideas, obviously, but I think that's what Christians need to do. They need to start thinking, what is the road forward, and how did we allow these elites to get into power? How did someone like Tony Blair hold so much popular sway for so many years? And he did. He won overwhelming elections whilst pursuing policies that a child would have said is mad. You know what I mean? This sort of great brilliance of all his government, and it was the most ridiculous policies. And he can't deny. He doesn't want to admit he screwed up because he didn't know what he was doing. He was a child, but that's reality.
Let's move on to Hamid Koskun, who's entered our country and burned the Quran. And he'll burn more Qurans, despite having been brought to justice, inverted commas. Now, you in the judiciary there, if you had the choice, in fact, do you have the choice of saying, well, I don't really want that judge on this particular case because I know which way he's going to go. He's not for freedom, he's for woke. So what would you advise to our friend, Mr. Koskun, when he burns the next Quran?
Yes, well, just a few points. It's quite a complex area. In terms of getting judges, most lawyers, if they're experienced in the field, and there's only a few that are really, most lawyers dance around a bit, if I could put it that way. They do a new area with a new judge. But if you have a lawyer very experienced, they do know what the judges think. And they've normally got a couple of contacts in the judiciary to somehow swing a judge. And then people do pay for that, if I could put it that way, gently. The issue of burning this Quran has become a very, very, very big issue because it's not a normal issue. The reason I'm going to say it's not a normal issue is because everybody believes, at least I hope they do, in respect for religions. Everybody believes you shouldn't blaspheme any religion, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Quran, Islam, Hinduism. The trouble is, every religion can be mocked, except one. So there's been a play in London, and the Mormons are portrayed as the silliest twits the world's ever seen as they go around with their little missionaries. They would never dare have a play, the Muslims are coming, and take the mickey out of Muhammad. They wouldn't dare. But every day, our judges would say, how had the Bible next to dirty nappy pants? That was a profound statement on art, our judges say, the Bible next to smelly nappies. But the Quran is a holy book. It's a book we all respect. You can't take the mickey out of Muhammad, and you can't put the Quran next to dirty nappies. They wouldn't dare. They all pretend they're so brave and avant-garde. So this is the problem. The problem isn't offending religion, because no one should be offended. And actually, Muslims must do much better to respect Jews and Christians. And we should insist on that. But we've got this situation where you can burn any holy book you want, say whatever you want, except for one book. And the reason you're not doing it is not because of any morality that you're pretending, it's because you're a scaredy cat. and they're going to do nasty things to you if you do it. So this individual is exposing the scaredy cats of the British, if I could put it that way. He's actually saying, I'm prepared to die for my right to do this. If I can do it to the Bible, I can do it to the Quran. And I mean, we recently there was recently in the theatres in England, the Jerry Springer show, where I think God is a congenital idiot, Jesus is his sex depraved son, you know, and some people tried to sort of stop it, some Christian groups. And the courts lauded about freedom of speech and artistic this, and people have to, you don't have to see the play if you don't want to see the play. But as soon as the Quran comes up, it's 12 years in prison, no questions asked, mate. How could you even dream? So we've got a scaredy cat problem. And whilst I believe all religions need to be respected, you can, as a minimum, I'm not even sure I agree with this, but if you're going to say you have to respect the Quran, anybody who puts an exhibition of the Bible on or a bad play on Jesus Christ must be treated the same, go straight to the clinker for 12 years. But what you can't have is the situation that we've got at the moment. I mean, this is part of the chaos of modern England. I mean, we've got large Islamic communities unintegrated. We've got a bloke coming from Turkey fighting his little anti-Islamic war on the streets of London. He's exposing our scaredy catness, but it's 50 years ago, this wouldn't even got off the ground in London. Some silly Islamic group scribbling about their book, it would have been swatted like a fly in 10 minutes. And the Brits would have said, we're getting on with our lives. So, yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question, but I've.
Well, it leads us into the final question. The war has started between Iran and Israel. And I've got the question that everybody is saying, is it the Third World War? Will it carry on? Or will it just be put on the back burners once again? Would you go as far as to say that Islam is not, especially the extreme variety which we get out of Iran, is not a good thing? And Israel actually are fighting for the world, not just for their own existence, but for the rest of the world.
I think what I would do, if I may, you let me, I'm going to answer it kind of spiritually, because it's, as Christians, Israel, end times, has been a confusing, difficult answer, and the role of Israel. I think what struck me is the Battle of Armageddon. For years, we've read these things in the Bible for years, like the mark of the beast. We read that for years. And when I was a little boy going to the sweet shop with my dad, and you sort of thought about the mark of the beast, it was some fantasy, And now you can see it. You can see digital currencies. You can see some little chip put into you. You've seen what the government's prepared to do during COVID, cut people's livelihoods off at a whim. And it's now seeable. That thing that we could never work out, when you're in the sweet shop in 1968, which I was, going, Daddy, can I have half a crown? And nobody knowing what the mark of the beast was, the slightest idea, and everything was, the little shopkeeper gave you monies as he'd done for the last 500 years. All of a sudden it's moved, and the goalposts moved in the last 10 years, 5 years, COVID. And same in Armageddon. It was a fantasy. It says in the Bible, every nation in the world will be at Armageddon. I can't remember all the things. I used to read a lot about it. And the destruction, I think it takes years to clear, and there'd be feet of blood. And you'd read it and you'd go, every nation in the world? What? Some little African country like Sierra Leone? British Army there? Mongolian army there. Oh, come off it. Who's going to bother on this little country called Israel that's 10 miles wide? But the thing that struck me, they hate Israel. Have you seen the hatred? It's non-stop. It's BBC distortion on steroids. They there's nothing the Jews can do. They're vile, they're perfidious, they're conquering. The poor Arabs who all lived in peace for centuries until this democratic advanced state appeared on their border that somehow sends everybody into apolepsies of rage. I can see so what I'm saying now is I can see how the world's moving. It's moving against Israel. They're whipping Jews into this wicked, evil people, preventing peace, Palestinians, causing wars with Iran. If only we could get rid of Israel, we'd all be fine. You can see it's heading there. And it's going to be done by the UN, and they're going to rope in everybody. So that's the first point I'm sort of making. You see Armageddon coming. And I think the second point I'm saying, and I don't know whether what I find interesting is when you've got all these demonstrations, like burning down London, violence spouted on the streets by these groups, when Donald Trump does his deportations and the fights break out, and the students are on campus wanting to do something totally stupid that only a fascist would do, there's always a Palestinian flag there. And I've never been able to work it out why. Why are people fighting deportation wearing Palestinian and Hamas flags? Because in every question now, this Israel Jewish thing is coming into it. You said, is it West and East? Or, are we fighting? Is Israel fighting? It's like it's everywhere now. It's on the campuses in England, the Palestinian flag. And, the Labour Party at their conferences, they just wave the Palestinian flag. They don't even have a Union Jack in sight. You know what I mean? And it's like it's becoming the Armageddon symbol. If you believe in Judeo-Christian values, responsibility, well, first, you're not interested in the Palestinian flag. And secondly, if you have any interest in it, you're probably pro-Israel. You're sympathetic to Israel. You get my meaning. But it's like it's becoming this dividing line. These radicals want to burn down the cities. That's the Hamas flag. Can you imagine it? A Hamas flag, a Nazi flag, the most cruel and evil people, and people rally around it because actually they have a hatred. There's a spiritual hatred in their heart against everything of God. You know what I mean? And I don't know again if I've answered your question, but I think these are great spiritual movements taking place in the Middle East. And nobody's, Netanyahu's going to be no Christian, if I could put it that way. You know what I mean? He's obviously a political leader. And the leader of Iran is certainly no Christian. But there is definitely spiritual forces at work that are taking us down these signs of the beast, Armageddon, a sort of hatred. It's an historical epoch. Actually, we need to be quite excited, Rodney. We're sort of I sort of sometimes wish I was alive in 1952 in the south of France. Wasn't it all normal then? I could get you know what I mean? But actually, we're alive at a very challenging moment, if I could put it that way. And I think the things are definitely shifting. And we have a menace of a media trying to brainwash us. And I hear all these lectures on Google. I mean, there was some guy lecturing, it was actually at Cambridge University, so it's he actually says like 30% of your thoughts are not your own. They've just been planted there by your internet, social media use. And you don't know they're planted there, but they're algorithming you, they're knowing what you think and do, and they're giving you information. And it's very sinister what's going on. And now we've got AI, and it's going to go on steroids. We don't know the truth anymore. Not only do we not know the truth anymore because the media is so corrupt. They've done it with global warming, Israel, EU, Trump. It's all baloney. You know what I mean? And now we can't even recognize it anymore because it's subtly through your own laptop. If that makes sense. Some of the challenges to your ideas or the shaping of your views is now coming through your own social media use. So we I think all we can say, Rodney, 'twas ever thus. My father was in the RAF in the Second World War, and he always used to tell me how easy us bums had it, as he would politely explain it to us. He said you don't know what it was like. We stood alone against Hitler and Stalin, who were allies, and America had abandoned us. That's what my dad used to tell me. And you know, the world was ever thus. We've always had our tough cookies.
Well, we have indeed, and the cookie needs chewing and enjoying sometimes, but I can't think that many people would enjoy. But it's important to talk about this between ourselves, friends, or whatever, to realize what is going on. And the worst thing that anybody can do when we reach critical mass, which we are at the moment, is to say, oh, let somebody else do it. Let it sort itself out. I'm not going to put my head above the parapet. And that is the biggest problem I feel with many countries, including the United Kingdom. It's live now time. Never mind the future. Let's just enjoy ourselves now.
And, and I agree, it's the greatest worry. Many a great empire has fallen because they lost the will. No one knows why the Byzantine Empire fell, the Roman Empire fell, but they just fell. These massive empires with accumulated knowledge and very advanced armies just fell to the Visigoths or the this or the that, who were just chopping at them and clubbing them.
Yeah. And it's important to speak out. It's important to express opinion in freedom if we can still do that.
Well, I don't think we can. I mean, I've been doing these cases for 20 years. And the funny thing was, I've got sort of deja vu. I was doing the street preachers in '01 or something. I started doing hate crimes very early. And I did all these sort of BA cross cases. You couldn't wear a cross at British Airways, but you could wear a turban and a chador, but not a cross. And all this madness. And then we fought them then, and we warned the British people then. And actually, they laughed and laughed. And it's just like a sort of deja vu. It's just going on and on and on and getting worse and worse and worse. And, and I don't even know what I think it is. People just don't want to ignore it. They want to sort of get their holidays, or they want to buy their. I think they know what's going on. I mean, no one can not see it, but they don't really want, But the risks are high because we every now and again some poor sod does do something, and we see him vilified by the BBC for 3 months. He loses his job. They normally take his house away. And then he says, oh, I'm bankrupt. And the British people go, tough on you, mate. You better sign on.
Finally, Tommy Robinson is seen by some as to be admired. The judiciary have clearly sussed him out, know how to deal with him, know how to put things through, know how to delay things like court cases. So the blob has certainly got him. If you ask anybody in the mainstream media about him, they are virulent in their speech. Has he got a point, Paul?
Well, the funny thing is, I'm going to have to look into him. I know very little about him. So I may be making words of ignorance now, but I think what worries me, if I could put it that way, and forgive me, Tommy, if I've got you wrong, but he doesn't come over to me as particularly leadership character or articulate. And I've heard him speak a few times. I haven't really looked into him. And I think what is worrying me, I think I was saying this a lot. I said, look what's happening in England, look what's happening in Germany, look what's happening in France. The big, intelligent, mature people are not stepping up to the plate. And if the big, intelligent, mature people do not stand up to the plate and start making some very tough decisions, and that is why Trump is a blessing for America. For once, a grown-up is saying, we have a problem. It has to be. You don't like the way I'm dealing with it, President Trump is saying. Well, you let it fester for 30 years. And if you dealt with it 25 years ago, you wouldn't have to have a guy like me dealing with it. And I think we've got a lot of issues. And if they're not dealt with, people are going to get desperate. I mean, every time you say that, you know, there's only so many times you can put on the ballot, enough's enough. And then you're going to start thinking the ballot doesn't work. And this is why we're in dangerous territory.
I know it's very complicated, Northern Ireland, but the particular riots at the moment are going on, and there's a lot of history there, but maybe it's symptomatic with what could happen in the rest of the UK.
Well, I think if the problems are not addressed, and again, we've had it in Southport, we're having it in Ireland, the problems, you are racist, there is no debate on it, you sent a tweet out, this woman sent a tweet out, you would get 3 years in prison, which is utterly ludicrous. You get my meaning. I mean, rapists don't. In fact, they're releasing the rapist to put the housewife in prison, if I could put it that way. There are problems. I'm sure the government aren't telling us the truth. I'm sure the police are keeping things very on a tinderbox. They know it. Their officers on the beat know it. You know, we had these gangs raping young girls. They kept that very quiet for lots of years. And the police were arresting fathers looking for their daughters. Police were arresting fathers looking for their daughters as racists. And so it's got to be dealt with. Someone's got to be big enough to take it, but someone's got to be clever enough to make the decisions. And indeed, if necessary, for example, with these gangs, work with the Muslim communities, because there are lots of decent Muslims who are horrified at these gangs. And I'm sure actually if we work together, we could deport them, if that makes sense. We can get rid of them with the support of the Muslim community, because they're going to be shamed by this. So,
thoughts, Paul, we have to leave it there. We've overrun, but we always do.
We always do.
We welcome you back. We will welcome you back very shortly.
Thank you, Rodney.